The email notification popped up on my phone, a simple subject line, family meeting. My stomach lurched. I hadn't heard from my dad in months, not since he'd sent a birthday card with a generic, impersonal message. And his wife, the woman who'd somehow managed to insert herself into our lives like a parasitic vine, was never one for pleasantries. It was a Friday night. I was already halfway through a bottle of whiskey, trying to drown the loneliness that had become my constant companion. The email was a reminder that even though I'd built a life for myself, a life where I was finally in control, I could never escape the shadow of my past. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at my dad's house. The same house I'd been kicked out of at 18, the same house my dad had promised me would always be mine. But like most promises from him, it had crumbled to dust. I arrived on time, my fists clenched, feeling like a trespasser in my own childhood. My dad, a man who could only be described as a walking embodiment of smug self-satisfaction, greeted me with a forced smile and a pat on the shoulder that felt more like a dismissal. His wife, Eleanor, was a vision of icy elegance. Her lips were painted a shade of red that could rival a stop sign, her eyes cold and calculating. She perched on the edge of a velvet armchair, her gaze fixated on a framed picture of her daughter, Ash. Ash, my stepsister, was a whirlwind of blonde hair and painted-on smiles. She was 5 years younger than me, the product of a brief fling my dad had with his secretary. She was also 8 months pregnant, the result of a short-lived relationship with a promising aspiring musician who'd skipped town a month before the baby was due. "You know, you've always been a good son, Mark," my dad began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. "Always so responsible, always willing to help out." He paused, his eyes flickering towards Ash, who was now delicately stroking her pregnant belly. "And now, you have the opportunity to do something truly special." My dad's words, coated in saccharine sweetness, hung in the air. I knew this wasn't about family or being a good son, it was about money. My dad, who had a history of relying on me for financial favors, had recently discovered my new house flipping business. "Mark's doing incredibly well, Eleanor," he said, pride bubbling in his voice. "He's finally come into his own. He's made more money in the past year than I have in my entire life." Eleanor smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. "Oh, Mark," she cooed, "you know we're all so proud of you." They laid it out then, their scheme. Ash's boyfriend, the promising musician, had turned out to be a deadbeat who drained her bank account and left her high and dry. She needed a place to live, a safe haven to raise her child. And I, the responsible, successful son, was the perfect solution. I had a house that was already paid off, a house they could easily claim as their own. They didn't even try to disguise it. They were using my hard work, my success, to solve their problems. They were using me. I sat there, numb, as they meticulously outlined their plan. They'd offered to pay me a pittance for my house, a fraction of what it was worth. It was an insult, a slap in the face. I stood up, my voice shaking with rage. "No," I said, the word a guttural growl. "I'm not giving up my house. I worked my ass off for it. I built it with my own 2 hands." My dad's smile vanished, his eyes narrowed. "Mark," he began, his voice laced with a threat. "You know we're family, you know we're all we have." "Family," I spat, the word tasting like bitter bile. "You call this family? You call abandoning your son for years, then using him as a pawn, family?" Eleanor rose from her chair, her gaze cutting into me like a knife. "Mark, don't be ridiculous, we're just trying to help. Ash needs this house. She needs a safe place to live, and you have the means to provide it." "And what about me?" I yelled, my voice echoing in the room. "What about my needs? What about the life I've built? What about the fact that I've been treated like an afterthought for my entire life?" My words seemed to hang in the air, reverberating against the silence. My dad and Eleanor exchanged a look, a silent communication of shared anger and frustration. "You're being selfish," Eleanor hissed, her voice dripping with venom. This is about Ash, about her future, about our future. No, it's not, I shouted. It's about control. It's about taking advantage of me, just like you've done my entire life. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. I was leaving the house, leaving them, leaving the family they so desperately craved. I was leaving because I was done being their pawn, their puppet, their solution. I was leaving because I finally understood they weren't family, they were parasites, feeding off my success, my lifeblood. As I drove away, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from their expectations, their manipulations, their insatiable greed. Free to build a life on my own terms, a life where I was in control, where I was not merely a pawn in their twisted game. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready. I had found my own strength, my own resilience. I had found my own voice, and I would use it to reclaim my life, my dreams, my future. I would show them that they couldn't break me, that I wouldn't be their puppet, their pawn, their solution. I would be my own hero, the architect of my own destiny, and I would rise above the ashes of their betrayal.